we've covered the gross anatomy of the kidney, so it's time to look a little more into the blood flow as well as the nerve supply. Now what's interesting is the kidneys themselves get about a quarter of all the cardiac output from the heart per minute. That's a lot of blood going into the kidneys. It just tells you how much blood the kidneys are handling, how much blood is being filtered, and how important this is to the entire system. Now, the arterial blood flow into the kidneys and the venous blood flow out of the kidneys pretty much follow a similar pathway, which that's good because that means the naming system is the same. So as long as you know the name of the arterial in, the venous out follows the same exact naming mechanism. Now, the nerve supply comes in sympathetic fibers via the renal plexus. So we have the renal plexus controlling the kidneys in this case. So blood flow and nerve supplies. What we need to do now is look into the individual names of all these blood vessels. So we'll start here. Now we know, again, from the previous video, the structures, we've already gone through the medulla, the cortex, we've gone through the ureter, renal pelvis. We're focusing on the blood vessels though. If you think back to the cardiovascular system, to the blood vessels, you know that the urinary system, so the kidneys, has the blood flow directly from the abdominal aorta. It then comes off via the renal artery. So those renal arteries branch directly off the abdominal aorta. So it's pretty much a main trunk coming right from the heart. So that renal artery, so that's this section right there, is going to then branch. When the renal artery branches, it's called the segmental arteries. Now those segmental arteries are going to reach out and branch into the kidney itself. From the segmental arteries, we go into the interlobar arteries. Now the interlobar arteries are the ones that go up into the lobes. They're in between each one of the pyramids. So as you go between the pyramids, that's the interlobar arteries. From the interlobar, you go to the arcuate arteries. Now the arcuate is going to be a border. It's what's right in between the cortex and medulla. So it creates this kind of border between the medulla and the cortex of the kidney. From the arcuate artery, we're heading up to the cortical radiate artery. Now this one, like the name implies, cortical, cortex, radiate, goes out. Each one of these that's going up, those are all cortical radiate arteries. They're radiating off the arcuate up into the cortex, cortical radiate artery. Now beyond that, this particular image doesn't really show because they're too microscopic. So we'll switch over. Here we have now a more blown up view. To give perspective, this whole thing right here is a cortical radiate artery, one single one. So that means we're looking at just one little piece of that cortex. This entire thing over here, that is a nephron. It's the functional filtration unit of the kidney. We definitely need to talk more about those later. But right now, we're just focusing on the blood flow. So from that cortical radiate artery, we go into the afferent arterial. That's just this little piece right there. Now it's smaller, so we've gone down to the arterioles. The afferent arterial means it's going into the glomeralis. So this network inside here, that network of capillaries, is the glomeralis. It's where the filtration into the nephron will occur. So that glomeralis is inside that cupping portion of the nephron. Now from there, you leave the glomeralis and go out to the efferent arterial. That's this structure. The efferent is exiting, is leaving the glomeralis. But if you're saying, hold on, it's leaving, why is it still red and arterial? We haven't gone through any gas exchange. The glomeralis is only meant for filtration. It's allowing the filtration of the blood to get into the nephron for processing. Gas exchange happens later. So we have the afferent arterial coming in, glomeralis, capillaries, efferent arterial coming out. Now that efferent arteriole is going down to this network of capillaries down here. That's going to be either the peritubular capillaries or the vasa recta. Now the reason there's an or is it's location based. Peritubular capillaries are primarily located in the cortex. The vasa recta is located down in the medulla. So for a large chunk of these nephrons, most of them stay up in the cortex, but there are a decent chunk that will dive deep into the medulla. We'll talk about why later, but that's the difference. Peritubular capillaries are the ones that stay up more in the cortex, maybe a little dip into the medulla. Vasa recta is a deep dip in the medulla, but two different capillary networks. So peritubular capillaries and vasa recta. Now, from there, we're heading out to the venule. That's this part, which means that's where we had gas exchange. Peritubular capillaries, vasa recta allowed for gas exchange of the actual nephron. Because now we're in the venule, we're doing our return trip. From the venule, we're heading out to the cortical radiate vein. So this whole thing here is the cortical radiate vein. You'll notice, just like the cortical radiate artery, there are branches here, that are not being attached to anything. Those would be coming from other nephrons and their capillaries. But for simplicity, we're looking at just one and one only at this point. Now from that cortical radiate vein, we need to go back to that larger view. So here is the cortical radiate veins. This blue, that blue, that blue, each one of those. One of those is what we were just looking at. So from those cortical radiate veins, we basically have the return trip. Same naming mechanism with one exception. We have the arcuate vein, again separates cortex and medulla. So arcuate vein. Then we have the interlobar vein, which goes between the pyramids. Here's the difference. Then we go right to the renal vein. So right from the interlobar vein goes right to the renal vein. There is not a segmental vein. The segmental only is in the artery. So the names all match up, except just ignore segmental on the way back. There's no segmental vein. So here's just a little blood flow showing the naming system in order. It's not showing the actual structures, but gives you an idea of between the reds, the blues, and the purples, which is oxygen rich, oxygen poor, and where they're exchanging gas at the purple. You'll notice inside the dashed lines here, those are the more microscopic aspects. They are the smaller vessels. Looking at the two arterioles, so looking at afferent and then efferent, and the three different capillaries, the glomeralis. We then have the peritubular capillaries, as well as the vasa recta. And then we start the venous return trip, going back to the vena cava eventually. So that's looking at the blood flow throughout the kidneys, which there's quite a bit of blood flow because a lot of filtration is occurring every single minute throughout your kidneys.